We are coming on the air with a lot of questions about the man in police custody connected to the murder of that healthcare CEO, with investigators interviewing who they call a strong person of interest, picked up at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania after somebody recognized him from all those pictures everywhere. So what is going on with that 3-page manifesto, the scrub of his socials, the ghost gun he was found with? A dramatic turn in the case captivating the country, and we are live with every angle. Then the bombshell verdict for subway rider Daniel Penny, a jury saying he is not guilty, as Jordan Neely's family reacts. The emotional day outside court with protesters, tears and fights. And what happens to Penny from here? Plus, we'll take you live to the Middle East with a new era now unfolding in Syria. Then the new war of words between Jay-Z and the lawyer representing a 13-year-old accusing him of rape in a new civil lawsuit. What they're both saying tonight in a story first brought to you by NBC News. And take a look at this wild new video after an apparent attempted hijacking on a plane from Mexico. Watch this, the passengers holding down the would-be attacker. What else we know tonight about his motive coming up a little bit later in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and tonight New York City police have that person of interest in the CEO killing. They say they found him, and sources are sharing exclusively with NBC News new images of the gun and one of the fake IDs he had on him. His name? Luigi Mangione. He's 26, a Penn grad, found at a McDonald's out in Altoona, PA. This one here, not in New York, of course, where CEO Brian Thompson was killed. What they found on Mangione, a ghost gun and a silencer that police say is consistent with the one used to kill Thompson. A 3-page handwritten manifesto showing that Mangione had what they call ill will toward corporate America. They also found those multiple fake IDs, including this one from New Jersey with the name Mark Rosario, not his real name, police say. And that one's important because that's the same fake ID he apparently used at a hostel in Manhattan before the shooting. Investigators right now are digging into his online posts, including some about the Unabomber. He managed to evade police for something like 6 days almost after the murder of Brian Thompson and that massive manhunt. After Thompson was shot, a moment captured on video last Wednesday in front of a busy Midtown Manhattan hotel. Shell casings that had deny, delay, depose written on them found at the scene, echoing a phrase that's been used by critics of the insurance industry to describe how insurers may dodge claim payouts. We've got team coverage tonight. Sam Brock is live for us in New York City. Tom Winter is in the studio with the latest from police. Sam, get to you in 1 second. But, Tom, let me start with you because there are a lot of questions here about some of the stuff, basically, that police found when Altoona police found this so-called strong person of interest. Start there. Start with why they're not going so far as to call him a suspect yet. Where do things stand?
Right. So the suspect definition, if you will, for the New York City Police Department actually has a lot of legal connotations, Hallie. So the fact that they have not put a charging instrument on him is the reason why they can't yet call him a suspect. There are some other reasons as it pertains to his counsel or potential legal counsel for them not to do that. So at this point, he's a strong person of interest. They feel like this might be the person. Well, you can remove might from that sentence. They feel like this is the person, but they're not ready to call him that just yet. So that's where this investigation stands at the moment. First things first, they got to put a charging instrument on him in a form of a complaint in Pennsylvania. We expect that within the next 24 to 12 hours, perhaps sooner than that. So they're going to file charges there. They could do that on the gun. If they found out he had nothing to do with the CEO killing, that gun that they've showed a picture of here today is what is called a ghost gun. That is illegal in Pennsylvania, so they'll have him on that just to start.
Sam, let me go to you here because obviously this name broke about, 5-6 hours ago, roughly here. Investigators, members of the media, the average internet citizen went online to try to find out everything they could about who Mangione is. Talk us through what we know about him. We know that he grew up or at least lived at some point just outside Baltimore, not too far from Washington. He did a stint out in Hawaii, ties to San Francisco, right?
Yeah, that's correct, Alice. So let's start with what police said and then what we learned. Police said he is a 26-year-old from the Baltimore, Maryland area. He went to school in Pennsylvania. His last known address was on Hawaii, and that he had some sort of ties to San Francisco. Okay, so that's the big picture. What have we learned in the hours since? He has a huge, prominent family in Baltimore, dozens and dozens of cousins, two older sisters, or two sisters, I should say, and a family that has such real estate and political ties that they own 2 country clubs at least. And they have another cousin, I suppose, of his, Nico Mangione, who was a state delegate, his chief of staff, posted that this is Nico's cousin, referring to Luigi, and we're going to come out with a statement later today. So huge family, lots of people, big footprint in Baltimore. Then it turns out with respect to Luigi, he did go to Penn. According to his fraternity chapter there, he was enrolled between 2017 and 2020. The University of Pennsylvania confirming that someone by that name also has a master's in engineering. So Penn undergrad, Penn grad school, and then Stanford confirmed as well that he was a head counselor for pre-collegiate studies in 2019. So he has ties to all of these incredibly prestigious universities, went to a prep school of some degree of prominence in Baltimore as well. There's a statement from Stanford. So you're looking at a puzzle piece of someone who's extremely well educated, appears to come from privilege, and we are getting some chatter on social media. None of this is confirmed at this point, Hallie, but some folks saying that there could have been some sort of a drift with family. He may have suffered some form of injury and had gone off the grid. None of that is clear, but what is obvious in this case is that you have someone with this incredibly illustrious background that now finds himself at the center of this person of interest update on a killer.
Tom, can you help us fill out that picture so far as we can? And I don't want anyone to get over their skis here at this point, but there do seem to be some early indications based on what our teams have found online, based on what you're hearing from police, that perhaps Mangione may have had this sort of bent towards political vigilantism, at least self-styled, based on what police have said, that he held ill will, for example, toward corporate America, et cetera.
That's right, Hallie, and that's exactly what Chief of Detectives Joe Kenny said today at his press conference with the NYPD, pointing out the fact that in this 3-page writing, he is very much anti-corporate America. We're starting to do some reporting around that, and I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I think it may tie it a little bit more closely back to the healthcare industry in this country. As far as his leanings online, you know, this kind of idea that if you eliminate somebody who's a potential problem, you could help a whole lot more people who are suffering from a problem. It's an ideology that is not mainstream, for sure, and it is an ideology that certainly law enforcement will look at, including, by the way, Hallie, some of the books that he apparently read online, if the account is tied back to him, and the fact that he could have written about the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. So all of that will be looked at. The NYPD has a team of analysts going to pour all over it.
Sam, let me go to you because there is some new reaction late today from United Health Group, that's the owner of UnitedHealthcare, about what this news could mean to Brian Thompson's family, right?
Right. They did speak to the fact, Hallie, that they hope that this brings some sort of closure to Brian Thompson's family. We know he was the father of 2 kids. They had a private service earlier today. And it really does sort of also speak to this commentary right now, the reflection of not just the crime that was committed, but how societally we have reacted. And I say that knowing, you know, there were things like look-alike contests in Manhattan, right? In New York City over the weekend, people almost tongue-in-cheek type of response to this. When the winner was asked, why would you do something like that? Isn't that insensitive? He said, isn't it insensitive not to cover people with basic health care? So it does give you a window into both the struggle of this family and the community and the industry at large in trying to come to terms with the imminent dangers that are now posed to, you know, relatively unknown executives and their loved ones versus the reality of people reacting everywhere vitriolically to an industry that many have anecdotally said has affected their families. I mean, it's this really odd juxtaposition. In the end, this man is murdered, and here we are understanding and trying to help see how his family is going to respond to that.
So, Tom, crack open your, reporter's notebook or your reporter's notes app here is for what you're looking for next. It's the charging documents. That's going to be significant. I would imagine any interviews or clues or discussions with Mangione's family could be critical here as to what they may have heard or seen from him in the months before this happened.
Oh, that's exactly right, Hallie. So what is this person? What is their background in law enforcement circles? You asked me to crack open the notebook. I just write pedigree. So it's their pedigree. It's their background. Who did they know? Wealth, status, age, relationships, etc. So they're going to put together a full pedigree on this individual and try to determine, do they have anything here or any types of threads to pull on? You know, the ghost gun, it's possible, if that is in fact his gun, that he made it himself. It's also possible somebody else could have made it for him.
Yeah.
And would that have been a situation where there could be additional charges? So all of those types of things I'm going to be looking for, as well as that arraignment that I mentioned. And then ultimately, the NYPD will send what they call a sheet, which is a notice to reporters that cover the department on a regular basis. We get the name and any charges, again, if they in fact charge this person.
Tom Winter, Sam Brock, thank you both very much. A day of very fast-moving developments. Appreciate you both being on top of it. Also tonight, new fallout as the ex-Marine who used a chokehold on an agitated subway rider walks free tonight after a jury acquitted Daniel Penny in the death of Jordan Neely, Neely's uncle, talking with our Antonia Hilton about what this verdict means to him.
It personifies ugliness. It personifies what has been already occurring in the United States of America. Because it should be some type of penalty that should have been handed down to Daniel Penny, period. I feel like the jury gave up on us.
I want to show you the scene outside court. You see Neely's family, some supporters in tears. At some points, you saw basically fights happening, some protests after the verdict over a case that was at the intersection of a whole lot of issues: race, crime, homelessness, mental health. Witnesses say Neely went into a subway car in May 2023 and began acting bizarrely. That's when Penny stepped in. We're going to show you that moment. It was captured on camera, but we've got to warn you here, it's hard to watch. You see Penny with his arms wrapped around Neely's neck. You got two other men also trying to hold Neely down as he's struggling on the ground. Rahema Ellis is in New York City for us tonight on this. Rahema, the jury didn't deliberate on this criminally negligent homicide charge for very long. They were deadlocked on the manslaughter charge that got dismissed. So talk through what seemed to be the key for jurors to acquit Daniel Penny.
They just felt, apparently, that the prosecution didn't prove its case in terms of criminally negligent homicide. It took this juror less than an hour this morning to reach that decision on this case against Daniel Penny, because the definition of criminal negligence is when someone causes death and it's more than just ordinary carelessness. Daniel Penny had said to the police the day that this happened that he did not intend to cause the death of Jordan Neely. He was just trying to, his words, put him down so he would not be a threat to any passengers on the train. As you point out, some people thought that he was a hero. Other people were saying that he was a vigilante and that something really needed to be done in terms of holding him responsible. There were these charges, as you point out: second-degree manslaughter dismissed, criminally negligent homicide. He was found not guilty of that. Hallie?
That split screen that you talk about, Rahema, has divided people not just in New York, but all across the country. There has been a ripple effect from this case. There has been some, capital D discourse that had this happened, let's say 3-4 years ago, perhaps this verdict may have been different, given that the country felt like it was in a different moment. Can you talk about the broader reaction here? What comes next here?
Well, let me answer the last question first. And what comes next is that will be a civil wrongful death suit filed against Daniel Penny. And people are continuing, as you can hear just right next to me.
I was going to say, obviously,
someone who
Rahema,
is concerned about the verdict. Yeah, it's still a case. It's still very fresh on the minds of people here, and they are voicing their objection to the way this went down. As I point out, even across the country, as you say, people are reacting to this. The Vice President-elect, J.D. Vance, he put out a statement today saying this case never should have been prosecuted in the first place, and he's very glad that the verdict came down that he did. Also, a note from the Coalition for Homeless People talking about that Jordan Neely wasn't the only victim, but the victims in this are all of those people who are homeless and who might also be struggling from mental illness and struggling to survive on the street. So again, as I say, some people looked at this as Daniel Penny, the hero, but others saw him as a vigilante, and that race played a big part in what he did. But tonight, no criminal charges against him anymore, but he is facing a civil case against him. Hallie?
Rahema Ellis, thank you very much. Appreciate that. A stunning new era unfolding in the Middle East tonight as Syrian rebels overseas try and show they are in control in the country. And fighters say a new government is already getting to work. A key rebel leader meeting with the Syrian prime minister as parliament pledges to back a new administration. Look at this. Rebels posting up outside government buildings, rushing to free hundreds of thousands of political prisoners from the notorious jails there after the collapse of the Assad regime under an attack led by a coalition of Syrian militias, led by a group called HTS, which the U.S. designates as a terror organization. Now, the power shift in Syria, you see it, right? I mean, it's celebrated by thousands of people. Look at this. Boys on an abandoned military tank cheering for freedom. As for Assad, he and his family have reportedly escaped to Moscow as leaders to Russia, Iran, the U.S. They all say they're pretty shocked his reign is over. It is a moment in history that will reshape the region, the superpowers that run it, and quite literally the map of the Middle East. I want to bring in Matt Bradley, who is live for us tonight in the region, in Lebanon. Okay, so the fall of the Assad regime, this moment that stunned people over the course of the last 72 hours and really over the course of the last several weeks, as you saw that very quick offensive by these Syrian rebel fighters moving in, capturing Damascus here. Now what? Because that's what this all comes down to.
Yeah, well, you were talking about the stunning scenes we've been seeing from Syria, the celebrations in Damascus, a lot of this, just people going ecstatic. It's all, of course, tempered by a little bit of anxiety about what all of this is going to mean and what it's going to bring for Syria and really the rest of the region. But we should note that there has been, as you were talking about, something like a peaceful transition of power, something like what looks like liberalism, possibly on the march in Syria. That would be a shocking development. But given the shocking developments that you mentioned that we've seen over the past couple of weeks, maybe it's not such a surprise. We've already been seeing conciliatory statements, and I'll quote these first from Syria's parliament, which is essentially now, it was loyal to Bashar al-Assad, who is now getting in Moscow with his family. They released a statement saying that they expressed their will. The fall of Assad, the Syrian People's Council support the desire to build a new Syria with a bright future. Then the elders from the town of Qardaha, this is the area where Bashar al-Assad, or his father, Hafiz al-Assad, who was also known notoriously as a dictator, he hails from this area. And this area, of course, as we've been seeing from a lot of Middle Eastern dictators, they will tend to pile money into their hometowns. This Council of Elders released a statement saying that they want to remove all statues and images from public squares and places. This is, of course, referring to statues of Bashar and Hafiz al-Assad and the rest of their family members, celebrating the cult of personality. This just goes to show this entire country, which has been locked in a war for 13 years, is now strikingly falling in line behind this new leader, a man who only about 10 years ago had known ties to al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, which he has since disavowed, but should be forgiven if you're in the international community for not necessarily believing him. But today, Hallie, we got some fresh news that it looks as though this man, this leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, has appointed a new prime minister, a man who was the prime minister of his regional government that the rebels controlled for the past couple of years in northwest Syria, out of the town of Idlib. Now, so far, we've been seeing him meeting with the outgoing prime minister, who was appointed by Bashar al-Assad, and meeting with al-Jolani. There was this picture earlier today of all of them meeting together. This looks like something that we really see quite rarely in this part of the world. And we don't always see in America either, a peaceful transition of power.
Speaking of, I guess you could say, you've got former President Trump, now President-elect Trump, who is set to take office in quite literally just over a month from now. So the timing here matters. He has indicated that he wants a hands-off approach to Syria. That is what he has said. Even in the last 48 hours, that has been part of his doctrine, right, over the course of his 4 years in office here. How does that shape or not what happens on the ground in Syria?
Look, I don't know. And I think a lot of us don't know. I'm not sure if Donald Trump even knows. His foreign policy is pretty scattered. The fact of the matter is that Donald Trump was very much against new wars back during his first term. But he was the first and only president to directly attack the Assad regime. And the United States put money into fighting against Islamic State in Syria and that kind of thing, supporting with lethal and non-lethal aid some of these rebel groups that were rising up against Bashar al-Assad about 10 years ago during the height of the Arab Spring. But it was Donald Trump, when he came into power, who fired missiles at targets belonging to Bashar al-Assad and his regime. So while Donald Trump may be able to say that he doesn't want anything to do with Syria, and we can believe him, his past behavior during his first term would show that he actually opened up a new front in that war.
There's also the matter, not at all insignificant, of the American journalist who's been basically held in Syria for more than a decade now. His family is speaking with our own Lester Holt. We're just getting a look at some of that interview here. I want to share what they told Lester. They're clinging to hope that the fall of Assad means, as President Biden has suggested, that their son is still alive, that he may be able to come home. Let me play it.
Does this feel different somehow?
It does feel different.
It definitely feels different.
We had several meetings here in Washington, both the State Department and the White House, and one of the things that we kept saying and ended up being echoed by them was that you know, in chaos, there's opportunity. This is an opportunity, and it feels stronger than any that we've seen or felt in a long time.
So where does the search for Austin Tice stand?
Yeah, well, it sounds as though the Biden administration is sending a special envoy to here in Lebanon, I guess, with the intention of going over to Syria, or at least to do negotiations here to try and finally free Austin Tice. But I got to tell you, Hallie, you know, it just pains me to hear these parents who have been struggling with their missing son for more than the past decade. But I have to tell you, hearing them talking about their hopes and their optimism, it's hard for me to reconcile that with what we're seeing here. The fact is that no one has seen or heard from Austin Tice directly for more than 10 years. And if the Syrian government had him, why wouldn't they say that they had him? Why wouldn't they show his face? Why wouldn't they say that he was imprisoned? Why wouldn't they put him on trial? We've seen that done with several other dissidents. He's been held as a hostage, but totally incommunicado. Now, the Biden administration says they have information that reveals that he's still alive, or if his parents are saying that they have their own information that says that he's still alive, well, I don't have my own information, so I can't argue with that. But when you look at what you're seeing here, it does look really unlikely that Austin Tice is still with us.
Matt Bradley, thank you very much. Live for us from
Beirut
tonight. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, right? But that is the reality here. We're going to play more Lester's conversation with Austin Tice's family coming up tonight on Nightly News, of course, and coming up here later in the show, a breakdown on just how Syria got here, a primer, if you will, on the ins and outs of what has happened. Speaking of Syria, we're just getting some new reaction here from President-elect Trump's top intelligence pick as she's facing questions about her alleged ties to the now ousted Assad leadership. That's Tulsi Gabbard on Capitol Hill. She is, well, that who you're looking at is Kristen Welker, but Tulsi Gabbard happened to be on Capitol Hill as well, again, after President-elect Trump sat down with Kristen Welker. She is Mr. Trump's choice for the Director of National Intelligence after one of several meetings she has planned with Republican senators today. She's not the only one on the Hill. You see her there in the bottom, but you've also got Pete Hegseth meeting with senators, potential FBI leader Kash Patel there, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, actually she's in the bottom there, up for ambassador to the UN. All as the president-elect, of course, as mentioned, speaks with Kristen in his first broadcast interview since his second election. And we learned some things from it. We learned something new from it. He thinks members of the J6 Select Committee, the January 6th Select Committee, should go to jail. He said he's not directing his administration to do that, but he wants that to happen. He's promising not to remove Fed Chair Jerome Powell, somebody he's criticized a bunch. And he's suggesting that his pick for Health Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a noted conspiracy theorist, should look into the long discredited link between vaccines and autism. So something, again, no credible scientist has proven. Ryan Nobles is on Capitol Hill for us. Let's just preface, there's a lot going on, right? There's a lot of moving pieces. I think you see it, even reflect with what we've got going on. Let's start with Gabbard and some new reporting from one of our colleagues, Dan DeLuce, showing that there are and appear to be bipartisan concerns about her time in Congress, that she might have leaked information to the Assad regime to the point that a Syrian defector's identity was hidden from her when she entered the room. Like, in other words, they were so concerned she would reveal his identity, they didn't tell her who he was fully. In the last few minutes, she says she supports President-elect Trump's stance. What else are we hearing about Tulsi Gabbard and that nexus to Syria?
Yeah, I think this is perhaps the biggest potential problem that she has when it comes to her confirmation process here by the United States Senate. It is safe to say that there are a number of senators that at least want her to explain her position as it relates to Syria and Russia, the fact that she had this secret meeting with Bashar al-Assad. What did she talk about during that meeting? What came of that meeting? And we tried to press Tulsi Gabbard on all of those points today. She did briefly speak to reporters, and I specifically pressed her on the idea that some of her fellow members of Congress have described her as a national security threat. And this is how she responded.
My own views and experiences have been shaped by my multiple deployments and seeing firsthand the cost of war and the threat of Islamist terrorism. It's one of the many reasons why I appreciate President Trump's leadership and his election.
So Gabbard has explained that trip to Syria to visit with Assad as trying to find some level of communication with the dictator in an area that was war-ravaged, looking for a peaceful exit to that problem, and also her concern about the rise of Islamic terrorists in that region. And if Assad were to be deposed, that Islamic terrorists would fill that void, which is a concern that national security experts have. But they also believe that Assad was such a brutal dictator that a change was necessary. And it's also important to point out Assad's close ties to Vladimir Putin, something that Gabbard has also not fully explained.
Ryan, as mentioned, there are a number of reporting targets that you and the team have on Capitol Hill. Can Pete Hegseth get confirmed? As you mentioned, can Tulsi Gabbard get confirmed? What happens with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. when he starts his rounds on the Hill here? And then, of course, there's Kash Patel, the man, the very controversial Trump loyalist, seen as a lightning rod picked to lead the FBI. And the reason why I bring this up is because in his conversation with Kristen, the president-elect talked about members of the January 6th committee who investigated that attack on the Capitol. Here's what he said.
For what they did, honestly, they should go to jail.
So you think Liz Cheney should go to jail?
For what they did.
Everyone on the committee, you think
I think
should
everybody,
go to jail?
anybody that voted in favor.
Are you going to direct your FBI director and your attorney general to send them to jail?
No, not at all. I think that they'll have to look at that, but I'm not going to. I'm going to focus on drill, baby, drill.
Okay, so this is an interesting response, Ryan, because on the one hand, he says he wants him to go to jail. He wants him behind bars. The other hand, he says, I'm not going to tell him to do it. But he is clearly making his desires known here, and Kash Patel has ears. How much has that come up, or do you anticipate it coming up on the Hill?
Well, it's definitely going to come up, Hallie, but I guess it's the form and fashion in which it comes up. And there is two ways to look at this, right? Republicans believe that Kash Patel's in a position to go and clean house at the FBI, not necessarily at doing Trump's bidding, but because they feel that the FBI and the Department of Justice have been unfair, particularly to conservatives. And as a result, they believe that Patel's the man to fix that problem. Listen to what John Cornyn, who is on the Intelligence Committee and someone who will have a big say in Patel's confirmation, listen to what he said after that meeting.
That is one of the biggest abuses that we've seen under Biden and under Obama to some extent, is that the erosion of its apolitical function into one that then chooses sides in a political contest and then uses the power of government to go after your opponents. That's wrong. That needs to change. And that was the first thing I said to him. He said he agreed.
So you have to follow the logic here, right? There's this huge concern that Donald Trump's going to use the Department of Justice to go after his political enemies. Republicans are arguing that's what happened in the previous administration, and Donald Trump was the target, and it's going to be Kash Patel's job to restore integrity to the department. I can bet there are more than a few Democrats who look at that line of thinking with a degree of skepticism. Hallie.
Ryan Noble is live for us on the Hill tonight. Ryan, thank you very much. In other news tonight, Jay-Z is denying the allegations in a civil lawsuit, first brought to you by NBC News, that accuses him of raping a 13-year-old girl more than 2 decades ago. The alleged attack happened with Diddy, Sean Combs, who faces numerous criminal charges he denies for sex assault and trafficking. Now, the girl, identified only as Jane Doe, alleges this happened at a house party after the VMAs back in 2000. She tried to get into the party and allegedly, quote, fit what Diddy was looking for. She allegedly had to sign an NDA to get into the party and says Jay-Z took off her clothes, held her down, and raped her. According to the suit, she resisted performing oral sex on Diddy by hitting him in the neck before running to a gas station to call her father. Both men deny all of it. We're going to break down some of the legal questions with Danny Savalas in just a second, but I want to start with Chloe Melas, who broke the story. We are already seeing now, right, the very intense battle here between Jay-Z and Tony Busby. He's the lawyer who represents the person filing this lawsuit. Talk us through it.
Hey there, Hallie. Well, Jay-Z is known to be an incredibly private person. He doesn't give many sit-down interviews, and generally you would expect to see a statement, especially with this serious allegation against him, Hallie, come through an attorney. But he looks like he almost typed this on his phone. I want to read you part of what he released last night. He says, "You have made a terrible error in judgment, thinking that all celebrities are the same. I'm not from your world. I'm a young man who made it out of the projects of Brooklyn. We don't play these types of games. We have very strict codes and honor. We protect children." Now, I do want to point out, Tony Busby, the Texas-based civil litigator who filed this suit on behalf of this Jane Doe. NBC News spoke to him just a few moments ago at his offices in Houston, Texas, and I want you to take a listen to a little bit of that now.
Anyone that suggests that a demand letter, especially the one that I sent, is extortion or blackmail is foolish. Attempting to attack me to take the focus off of the alleged perpetrator won't work, and it won't intimidate us.
So what Tony Buzbee is talking about is that before he filed this suit yesterday, Hallie, naming Jay-Z as Celebrity A, he sent a demand letter to Jay-Z's legal team saying that he wanted to engage in mediation, meaning let's sit down and let's talk money before I name you in a suit. Now, Jay-Z's legal team and Jay-Z is saying that this is blackmail, this is extortion, and I didn't want to pay him one red penny. And that is why he stood his ground, and he's saying now Buzbee is coming after him, and that's why Jay-Z has released a statement now saying that he and Beyonce have to sit down with some of their children to talk to them about these heinous claims.
So talk more about the Beyonce angle of it. Obviously, he's his own person. He's a sort of superstar in his own right. These charges are against, these allegations filed in the civil lawsuit are against Jay-Z that he denies. He is, of course, the partner to Beyonce. Has she reacted at all? Have we seen anything from her world on this yet?
So, Hallie, she hasn't said anything. Again, They are a notoriously private couple, but they are arguably the most powerful couple when it comes to Hollywood in the entire world. So there are a lot of things that are coming up for both of them. I mean, Jay-Z has a massive role with the NFL. You know, he has a big hand in the Super Bowl and the Super Bowl halftime show. In just a few weeks, the Disney movie Mufasa is coming out, and Beyonce voices one of the characters, and so does her daughter Blue Ivy Carter, and it's her theatrical film debut. And then you also have the Grammys in February, and you would expect Beyonce with her Big Cowboy Carter album to be there, as well as Jay-Z alongside her. And I think a lot of this right now in terms of public appearances is at stake.
Chloe Malas, thank you so much for your reporting and for bringing it to us tonight. Appreciate it. Let me go to our legal analyst, Danny Savalos, because, Danny, I want to pull up one part of Jay-Z's statement where he basically kind of challenges the accuser to file criminal charges if the allegations are so bad, to paraphrase him. The question that comes up, and he says, I implore you to file a criminal complaint, not a civil one. Like, would you not agree? Presumably, there is a statute question here, right?
There may be.
Statute of limitations, yeah.
Right, exactly. Statute of limitations, period. But it depends on the specific crime alleged and, of course, where the crime is alleged. Different statutes of limitations in different jurisdictions, even though the civil case may be in New York. So here's the thing. It's not something I would recommend. But look, if you want to get out in front of an issue and you're that confident that you're not going to be prosecuted, I guess I can see it from a PR perspective. But look, criminal defense attorneys, we're risk-averse creatures. That's not the kind of thing you want a client to announce. Please go ahead, go down the street, go to the police, and file a criminal complaint against me, whether or not you have some protection from the statute of limitations. Because what we've seen in the last several years is that things like conspiracy and other ongoing acts can toll or extend a statute of limitations. So never a good idea to invite criminal prosecution.
So to that end, wearing your criminal defense attorney hat, what do you make of the tone toward Tony Buzbee here, this sort of very well-known attorney here, and Jay-Z?
Yeah, I'm a lawyer. I do plaintiff's work like Buzbee. But when he says that the letter that he sent was not extortion, I understand what he's saying. It's a demand letter. We lawyers send them all the time. Now, you do have to be careful that you don't demand money on threat of, hey, I'll just make a public announcement. You may remember Michael Avenatti. He got into trouble. That was a textbook example. He went to Nike and said, if you don't just give me money, you didn't really mention a claim, then I'm just going to make an announcement. It'll ruin your market value. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the gist. You can't do that. What you can do is write a letter saying, I will exercise my constitutional right to go to court and make a filing of a claim against you. And Buzbee just asked to mediate. That was very clever. He's just saying, hey, I'm not even asking for money. Let's have a meeting, and it'll be secret.
Danny Savalos, thank you very much. You can see more of our reporting on this Jay-Z issue tonight with Nightly News at Lester Holt, 6:30 on your local NBC station. Coming up here on this show, the EPA's brand new ban on 2 chemicals used to clean our clothes. What you need to know. Plus, the new bump in the road for the Onion's big plans to buy InfoWars. Is a judge going to let that deal go through? Remember that huge news that the Onion, that parody website, was buying InfoWars, the far-right conspiracy theory website? The internet went nuts, right? But hold on. Pump the brakes here, because Alex Jones, the conspiracy theorist founder of InfoWars, is fighting the sale of his site. He's claiming collusion and fraud, saying another company affiliated with Jones, not the Onion, was actually the highest bidder. The sale of InfoWars in that bankruptcy auction was part of the liquidation of the Jones empire, intended to pay more than $1 billion for defamation lawsuits to relatives of victims of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in Connecticut. Jones had repeatedly called the 2012 shooting a hoax. Obviously, it was not. Priscilla Thompson has been in court in Houston. She is outside now and joining us now. So where do things stand? Can the Onion buy InfoWars or not?
That remains an open question. Right now, we heard opening statements just a little while ago with the Onion and the Sandy Hook families who are backing their bid financially. Attorneys for them saying this was a completely fair auction and the sale should be approved. But then you had attorneys for Alex Jones and also for the company he's affiliated with and their bid saying that the trustee, the bankruptcy trustee, actually allowed the Sandy Hook families and the Onion to up their bid and that they did not have an opportunity to do that. And they're also saying at the same time that that wasn't even the highest bid. So they're saying this whole thing needs to be redone and that they should technically be the winner. Now, how did we get here? So back in November, there was an auction that was held, and the trustee who oversaw the auction said that while the Onion's bid was only $1.75 million, meanwhile, the company affiliated with Alex Jones bid $3.5 million, the Sandy Hook families agreed that they would forego the proceeds of that sale in order to pay off Jones's debtors. So the trustee said that in all, their bid was actually $100,000 more than the bid by the company affiliated with Alex Jones. And so the judge wants to take a very close look at how the trustee came to that decision and whether it was the right decision. And of course, up at stake here is whether or not he's going to approve that sale. He could deny the sale and declare the other company affiliated with Alex Jones as the winner, or he could call for a completely new auction. But I will tell you, they are still on witness number 1 inside right now, the auctioneer. They're expected to go till probably about 8 o'clock Eastern now today, and then they'll be back at it again tomorrow with at least 9 other witnesses on the list that we've seen to be called, including Alex Jones himself, who is listed on that list and we're told will appear virtually. Hallie?
Priscilla Thompson, thank you very much. Live for us in Houston. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, is banning 2 cancer-causing chemicals, sometimes used in dry cleaning. The agency says they're known to cause liver and kidney cancers, among others. Environmental and health advocates have been trying to get this across the finish line for years. One EPA official says it is simply unacceptable to let these kinds of chemicals be used when safer alternatives exist. Number 2, Laura Trump says she's stepping down as the co-chair of the Republican National Committee. She's President-elect Trump's daughter-in-law, of course, married to Eric. And there's a lot of speculation she may possibly get picked to fill a vacancy in the Senate. Remember, Laura Trump only became co-chair of the RNC back in March. The Republican National Committee did not immediately respond to a request for comment from NBC. Number 3, you heard about Juan Soto? He's leaving Yankee Stadium for Citi Field, 15-year contract. Hang on, hold on to your hat. $765 million with the Mets. That is a lot of money, and it's believed to be the biggest deal in pro sports history. Soto hit 41 home runs last season with the Yankees. He helped lead the team to the World Series, and now he's doing it. Number 4, Merriam-Webster, picking its word of the year, saying it is polarization, defining it as division into 2 sharply distinct opposites, especially a state in which the opinions, beliefs, or interests of a group or society no longer have range along a continuum, but become concentrated at opposing extremes. Number 5, Golden Globe nominees announced today. Emilia Perez, The Brutalist, and Conclave dominated the list of movie nominees. As for TV, The Bear and Shogun led the pack. Wicked got 4 nominations. Coming up, we got to get to a breaking news update that's just into us. We are expecting to see the arraignment of the person of interest in the CEO killing for the gun charges he's facing. That is set to happen, looking at my clock, less than 20 minutes from now. We may get new information. He is expected, we believe, to appear in person. Stay with us. We're going to carry that for you live the second that it happens. You'll see it right here on NBC News Now. We've also got some other coverage to get to before that when the clock ticks over to the top of the hour, including the new red flag warnings and record-breaking winds that could bring more fires to California, while utilities may be cutting power soon. And the chaotic conflict in Syria started long before the fall of Assad. How did the Middle East get to this moment? Next. The Assad regime now over after more than half a century of rule and a 13-year civil war. With Bashar al-Assad and his family leaving the country, they've been granted a safe haven in Moscow, according to Russian state media. You've got Syrians in the streets of Damascus and beyond celebrating Assad's fall. So how did we get here? And what comes next? Yasmin Vasugian takes a look in tonight's breakdown. And just a warning, some of what you're about to see is disturbing.
The civil war began in 2011 after pro-democracy protests swept through Syria during the Arab Spring. Assad cracking down on dissidents with force and his army, backed by powerful allies Iran and Russia, fighting rebel forces inside Syria. Neighboring Turkey breaking with Assad early in the war, supporting opposition fighters. The U.S. hesitant to intervene, fearing a wider conflict and labeling some of those rebel forces religious extremist terrorist groups themselves. But in 2012, then President Barack Obama warning Assad.
A red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized. That would change my calculus.
Then it happened, evidence of a chemical attack on the Syrian people outside Damascus in 2013. Killing 1,400 people, Obama asking Congress to authorize a strike.
Good afternoon, everybody.
That didn't happen. This haunting photo of a 3-year-old boy lying face down on a beach in Turkey after drowning, becoming a symbol of the refugee crisis in 2015. Millions fleeing the war-torn country for neighboring countries and Europe. And another horrifying image the next year of a child stunned in the back of an ambulance in Aleppo. In 2018, another chemical attack against civilians. This time, the Trump administration responding with targeted airstrikes. And yet Assad held on to power with Russian and Iranian proxy support.
Hezbollah came to his aid and was a key player in helping him take back Aleppo and stay in power. So were Iranian militias and Iraqi militias that came in. So the Shiites really clung together.
But as Assad's allies weakened or became distracted, so did Assad. The war in Ukraine strained Russia's resources, and Iran suffered economically from crippling sanctions. Then came October 7th.
We will take mighty vengeance for this black day.
A war on Hamas, then Hezbollah, both also proxies of Iran, providing an opening for Syrian rebel forces.
Israel just pounding Hezbollah, hurting Iran badly, and really changing the balance of power.
The rebel leader saying a newfound discipline in his forces led to the overthrow, which after more than a decade of war only took weeks.
The revolution has transitioned from chaos and randomness to a state of order.
But as Syrians flock back to their homeland, liberation comes, not without uncertainty.
Yasmin Vasugian is joining us now, and there are so many international powers who are involved in this.
Yeah.
The U.S., Russia, Turkey, Iran. You've got Israel. You've got the Gulf states. Explain sort of these very complicated puzzle pieces. I know that's not a task you can do in 30 seconds, but as we look ahead to the sort of immediate short-term next steps.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of know what's really going to happen from here, but we heard from Abu Muhammad al-Jilani, who did that interview with CNN just a couple of weeks ago, and he's trying to kind of paint himself more as a moderate individual despite being designated a terrorist by the United States. He's kind of reaching out now because he certainly needs allies. He needs the Gulf states to be friendly towards him. He needs the United States as well, because what happened with Assad is, despite the fact that there was a civil war for 13 or so years, he had the support internally of Shia Muslims in the country. But he lost money over time, Hal, and one of the reasons why he ultimately fell was because of the lack of finances he had in his country. And so Jilani, if he wants to keep Syria going and to rebuild this country, what they need is they need oil, they need gas, and they need money. And that money will have to come from outside sources. We've already heard from President Biden, who has, in a way, celebrated Assad's fall, but President-elect Donald Trump has said, and I'm paraphrasing here, we're not going to get involved. This is their fight. However, we're going to have to wait and see who and where the Gulf states will really land on this thing, Hal.
Yasmin Vasugian, thank you very much. Appreciate that. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Western Bureau, the leader of the polygamous sect near the Arizona-Utah border is facing decades in prison at his sentencing today. He pleaded guilty to a years-long scheme to transport girls across state lines for sex acts. He also acknowledged taking underage brides. Also out of our Western Bureau, red flag warnings in place now for 12 million people across Southern California because humidity is low. Everything is like really dry, all the trees, all the branches, the bushes. Those Santa Ana winds are bringing some very dangerous fire conditions with gusts up to 65 miles an hour. Local utility companies say they're ready to cut power to try to prevent any electrical equipment from accidentally sparking a wildfire. And out of our Northeast Bureau, New Jersey is becoming the latest state to ban book bans. Illinois and Minnesota have already done it. The Jersey law would apply to the state's schools and libraries, preventing books from being censored just because somebody finds them offensive. The nonprofit group PEN America reports more than 10,000 books were removed from school shelves in the last school year, 3 times as many as the year before. Coming up, we are expecting to see the arraignment of that person of interest in the CEO killing for the gun charges he's facing in just about 10 minutes now. We are going to bring that to you live. We've got crews at the courthouse. We expect potentially some other information to come out. And NBC News has some new reporting on an image, a very specific image that investigators are now looking into. We're scrambling to turn this around. We're going to bring it to you in just a second. Plus, we've got more on that stunning scene on a flight in Mexico, how a passenger stormed the cockpit and tried to hijack the plane to the U.S. We're just getting some new video in showing a pretty scary scene after a passenger allegedly tried to hijack a flight from Mexico and reroute it to the U.S. Look at this. You're about to see these other passengers. There goes the person trying to restrain this suspect, calm him down as he's trying to force his way into the cockpit. It all happened on a Volaris flight. That's a Mexican budget airline. The plane made an emergency landing at a nearby airport. The Mexican National Guard took him into custody, and the flight kept on going to Tijuana, where it was headed. I want to bring in Guad Venegas, who's been following this story for us. What happened? Why did this person want to try to come to the U.S.? Do we know?
Hallie, well, Mexican authorities are now confirming, because we had heard from some of the witnesses, that this man says he had received a message threatening to kill him. So what federal authorities in Mexico are saying is that airline employees who were interviewed after the incident say that the man claimed to have received a message right after or right before takeoff, that is, from León, Guanajuato, saying that if he were to arrive in Tijuana, he would be killed. And this is why the man attempted to first hurt one of the flight attendants, this in an attempt to take control of the airplane and force them to land in the United States. We have also heard this from witnesses. In fact, a lot of the details we've received about what happened and to sort of explain what we see in those videos have come from some of the witnesses. Here's one of those witnesses, a passenger who spoke to our colleagues at Telemundo.
The man wanted to open the door and throw himself out. He also grabbed a pen and tried to stab the flight attendant. It was a very, very, very scary experience. I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
Now, he mentions about the door. In the video, we see the man being held back by some of the passengers. It appears to be that happened after the plane landed in Guadalajara and they opened the door. They were waiting for the officers on the ground to come in and take custody. And it appears to be that at that moment, they were trying to hold him in place inside the airplane before the officers arrived to pull him out of the plane. Now, it's also interesting to see the airline statement saying that the crew responded to control the situation. But in the videos, Hallie, what we see is passengers who held the man back. And we had also heard from some of the passengers that he tried using a pen to hurt one of the flight attendants. And also today we have new information that when the officers took him into custody, Hallie, he tried to take away a weapon from one of those officers, causing the vehicle he was being transported in to crash. And the man is currently in a hospital in Mexico receiving treatment. Hallie.
Guad Venegas, thank you very much. Coming up, we're going to take you live to Pennsylvania, where we apparently have just seen that person of interest in the CEO killing arriving for the arraignment. Our folks on the ground are telling us that they are turning around this material. We are going to bring it to you live in just a second. Again, a critical development in a case that captivated the country, of course. The killing of Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. We're going to have much more coming up as soon as we sneak in a very quick break next. So government workers in Tokyo are about to get a long weekend every weekend, with the city government introducing an optional 4-day work week, apparently to give people more time to have babies. Because Japan, with a notoriously intense work culture and a high cost of living, is having a population crisis. Basically, people aren't having enough kids to keep the population stable. So the government's trying to give people more time at home to raise a family. Various companies in the UK, New Zealand, Iceland have been trying out these 4-day work weeks, although with different stated objectives. And some researchers find it helps workers do more and feel better. Brian Chung is joining us now. So work culture in Japan, this is optional, right? Like, what's the vibe here?
Yeah, and look, when it comes to the work culture in Japan, it already has this stereotype of this kind of salaryman, overworked, in many cases burnt out type of work. So it's understandable that they're saying, okay, well, if we have this kind of cultural issue with an aging population, we want people and want to incentivize people to have more kids and be able to spend time and raise those kids, well, then maybe we should just shorten the work week. That's the reason behind, or at least the thinking behind this shorter 4-day work week. And again, when you look at the stats, again, this is all about population for them. What you're looking at here, by the way, this is for a pilot program that was done in the United Kingdom. They did it with 61 businesses. 56 said they would continue to do so, and 18 said that change would be permanent. So in other jurisdictions where they've tried that, they've had some success. But again, when you look at Japan, they have a 1.2 fertility rate. That is much lower than other types of countries around the world, and they really want to get that somewhere closer to 2, which is where scientists say would be healthier for a sustainably growing country. That's the reason behind the thinking here. But again, we'll have to see whether or not that works. Could take years, even decades, to assess the effectiveness of a program like that, Hallie.
Brian Chung live for us on that. Very interesting, quite the talker. Brian Chung, thank you very much. Appreciate it. That does it for us for this hour. We're going to have more coverage coming up right now. Hey, I'm Hallie, and we are coming on the air just seconds away from the arraignment, apparently, in western Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania, for the so-called person of interest in that CEO killing. You see him there. This is the first image that we're getting of Luigi Mangione. Look at this. Our teams outside court just got this. So this is him walking in, ready to be arraigned. Taking a moment here, the first time that we are seeing this person since that 5 or 6 day manhunt ended, after that shocking, targeted killing of Brian Thompson in Midtown Manhattan last week. The CEO of UnitedHealthcare, Luigi Mangione, 26 years old, a Penn grad, somebody who had potentially, he certainly was found at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. He was found, police say, by an employee who recognized him, who called police saying that he was acting suspicious. And police found a number of items, they say, in Altoona on his person, in his backpack with him. They found this, the so-called ghost gun, police say, that may have been created using a 3D printer. We don't know who actually created it. Police say it's consistent with the one used to kill Thompson. They found a 3-page handwritten manifesto showing Mangione had what they call ill will toward corporate America. They found multiple fake IDs, including this one from New Jersey with the name Mark Rosario on it, obviously a fake name, according to police. Investigators right now are digging into whatever they can online, including, and this is some new reporting here from NBC News, as you take a look at this image here. This is, of course, Wednesday in New York City in Midtown, the day the shooting happened. Investigators are, we understand, now looking at an online post, including a picture he put up of an X-ray of a person's back with screws in it to see if that is related to all of this, to see if that was Mangione's back, a relative's, for example. That's according to 2 senior law enforcement officials. Why does that matter? Because it may be another clue, potentially, on any motive here. Stephanie Gosk is live for us in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Tom Winter, Danny Savalas are with us as well. Steph, let me start with you here. That first look, of course, at this so-called person of interest. Talk us through. Arraignments are typically very quick, right? Any expectation that this is going to be any different?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, it's really important to say that he has been arrested on unrelated gun charges. He has not been charged yet in the murder of CEO Brian Thompson. But as you can see, he's being walked into the courthouse for an arraignment. It's unclear whether he's going to plead yet in this moment. Maybe he does. That's what we're waiting to find out. His day ending very differently than how it started, Hallie. He was here at this McDonald's eating breakfast, and one of the employees saw him, clocked him, thought he was looking suspicious, and called the police. And the NYPD say the breakthrough in this case really is because of those photos that were released, especially the photos where we saw the face of the suspect. You know, those images of him checking into the hostel with that smile on his face. Then, as you say, when law enforcement showed up here, he showed them a fake ID with the name Mark Rosario on it, a New Jersey ID, the same one that he used to check into that hostel, Hallie.
Steph, one of the things here, one of the new pieces of information, I'm going to ask you to stand by for just a second, Tom, is this picture of a spine with screws in it. Explain why two senior law enforcement officials are telling you and our WNBC colleague, Jonathan Deans, that this could be interesting. Tom, if you can hear me.
Hey, Hallie. So I think there's a couple of different things that we're looking into, and as you can imagine, it's kind of confused because we have so much that's going on here behind the scenes as we try to figure out what's happening in court and what's happening overall. I think one of the things that investigators are starting to take a look into is a number of social media posts which might be helpful for their case. Here's a good example, and this is just as they try to determine what may be a motive. This idea that he's posted a photo of a X-ray that shows a back with screws going into it. Is that his back? Is it a relative's back? Does it have anything to do with the case? Is it a reason why he maybe was upset at the healthcare system? All questions that are being asked tonight. So that's something that that they're taking a look into. They're taking a look into posts that reference Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, on an account that he had that listed the types of books that he read. So that's something that they're taking a look at as well. So it's just a number of different things. You know, Hallie, over the past couple of days, you and I have talked about facial recognition in this case. Yeah, getting some information on that tonight. It might have been that photo, which was a screen grab of the surveillance camera at the hostel, it just wasn't enough of a high quality for them to be able to make a match. But he had no criminal record in New York and no New York driver's license, which then makes that a bit of a challenge as well. So, again, we're finding out more. We've got more questions. That's kind of where the case is at the moment.
Yeah, okay. Steph, let me go back to you. You had a chance. I don't know, actually, what you've been doing on the ground in Altoona. I know you're in front of that McDonald's. Did you get a chance to talk to anybody there? What have you heard?
I have not spoken to anyone here. You know, and it's interesting. We left this morning as soon as we heard this news. This town in Pennsylvania is 280 miles from New York City, and they believe, and this is interesting, that the suspect in the case actually took a bus, or rather Luigi Mangione took the bus. So they're not referring to him yet as the suspect. Took a bus the day of the murder, just moments after the murder took place, and potentially that bus came here, went to through Philadelphia. They're looking into all of that. And then he ended up here at this McDonald's this morning.
Steph, thank you very much. I want to flag to folks that we are expecting now, we've just learned, at 6:30 Eastern time, so looking at my clock, in about 26 minutes from now, you are looking at the room where we expect to see a news conference, one that will include Governor Shapiro to join Pennsylvania State Police, local law enforcement for an update as well. So obviously an evening of some fast-moving developments. That's our live shot. And again, this is what we saw. That person of interest, believed to be connected to this case that has captivated the country, walking into the courthouse for that arraignment. Tom, I want to go back to you because I just want to explain to people, if they're like, well, why aren't we seeing it? Like, why aren't we watching this? Why aren't we getting more information? It's because, as you mentioned, no cameras are allowed in court. We have a reporter, several producers inside with a pen and paper. They're taking notes, and when they get out, they will transmit it back to us, right?
That's right. In most courts in this country, Hallie, certainly in the federal system, but also at the state level, having covered a number of high-profile cases in Pennsylvania, it is sometimes just pad and pen only. It can be a brawl just to bring in a laptop to be able to type notes and then email them back to us. So that's something that folks should keep in mind. The other thing is, because it's an arraignment, they basically have to have them go through that arraignment, and then once they do, they'll be able to provide us with the court documents. So if you've come back to me and I'm glancing pensively at my phone, that's the reason why, because it'd be great to get that. But to your point, and the point Stephanie was making before, this is not going to give us a lot as it pertains to anything involving what could be a charge in New York City. The fact he had a ghost gun, he was cooked from a legal standpoint, or at least from a charging standpoint, just by having that in his possession.
Tom, thank you. Danny, let me go to you now for the legal intricacies of this, because, Steph, we've made the important point. This is a person of interest. Police are not going so far as to call him a suspect at this point. They do say they found that 3-page handwritten manifesto on his person. They say they found that gun that police say is consistent, their words, with the weapon that they believe was involved in the killing of Brian Thompson. Talk us through what happens from here.
Right, and that's why you're seeing him only charged with the firearm at this point. That's the safe move. No matter how certain they are initially that this may be their suspect, the safe move is to charge him only for the gun. That gets you to arraignment, allows you to detain him. You continue the investigation until you're certain. Maybe if they have DNA, maybe if they have prints, they can match those up. But in the meantime, you charge him with what you can to hold him. Now he's going to what's called a magisterial district justice in Pennsylvania. I practice in Pennsylvania, should be in Blair County, but these are not the main court of common pleas. They might just be a local attached to the police station. It's usually where your very first appearance is in state court in the state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's procedurally what will happen. He'll almost certainly be held. And then the extradition process will begin. And usually, you saw this with the Brian Kohberger case, for example, there is a procedure. The defendant can waive that procedure. Normally, it requires a governor request formally in writing, and a defendant really is prolonging the inevitable. So it's not unusual for a defendant to say, I waive all of this procedure to speed my return back to New York, where I have to face charges. But it is up to the defendant how hard and to what degree he wants to fight extradition. But the reality is extradition is a foregone conclusion. He's going to end up back in New York one way or the other if New York wants him.
Stephanie Gosk is still with us, and I believe she may be at least for another minute or two before she's got to, I know, head over to Nightly News. Steph, talk us through what we're learning about who Luigi Mangione is, because it's not just investigators. Of course, journalists, internet sleuths, et cetera, have been combing his socials. They've been trying to put any pieces together about why he may be connected to this, as police are suggesting.
Yeah, right. Well, he has an interesting, perhaps surprising history, Hallie. You know, the NYPD says that he is from Baltimore, Maryland. His most recent address is from Hawaii, but he has a lot of social media accounts. Goodreads, like Tom mentioned, Facebook, X, Instagram, LinkedIn. And from those social media accounts, we're learning a lot about him, where he went to school. He attended a prep school, a private high school in Baltimore, where he graduated valedictorian. He then went on to University of Pennsylvania, where he got a bachelor's and a master's in computer science. There's a fraternity there that says that he was a member of that fraternity. And then, as Tom mentioned, you have these posts in Goodreads about a possible interest in Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, who really terrorized this country in the late 90s and killed 3 people, injured others with bombs. He wrote a long manifesto, and in Goodreads, what Mangione does is he reposts, he shares another person's take that seems to, if not embrace, at least support what Ted Kaczynski was up to, calling it a revolution as opposed to just talking about violence. It seemed to embrace violence. Now, we don't know whether that leads to motive, but you know, the police have been very careful about talking about motive here. They said they don't have a motive in this case. We do know that the bullets that were left at the scene of the murder of the CEO said deny, delay, depose. Those were apparent language linked to how health insurance companies deny people coverage. But again, the police not going as far as to say they have a motive in this case, Hallie.
Stephanie Gosk, thank you very much. Tom Winter, let me just go back to you quickly. We are waiting for news out of this arraignment. Yeah, that's where things stand as we're looking ahead of that press conference in about 20 minutes from now.
That's exactly right, Hallie. And so we should get some court paperwork after that time. And it's a little bit fluid. It has to be uploaded, et cetera. But look, there'll be details that we'll continue to get throughout the night and obviously well into tomorrow.
All right, Tom Winter, thank you very much. Stephanie Gosk, Danny Savalos, thank you as well. We're going to ask you to stand by. We're going to come back the second that we hear anything else from what is happening inside the Blair County Courthouse. As we're looking ahead, you can see it here, too, Blair County, Pennsylvania. This is near Altoona. Altoona, about 7-8 miles or so, 15, 20 minutes from the courthouse in Hollidaysburg, where we believe this person of interest, as police are describing him, is being arraigned. We're going to bring back our team the second that we get any other information. But in the meantime, it has been a day of a lot of developing news. A number of breaking headlines tonight, including the new fallout as the ex-Marine who used a chokehold on an agitated subway rider walks free after a jury acquitted Daniel Penny of Jordan Neely's death. Neely's uncle talking with our Antonia Hilton about what this verdict means to him.
It personifies ugliness. It personifies what has been already occurring in the United States of America. Because it should be some type of penalty that should have been handed down to Daniel Penny, period. I feel like the jury gave up on us.
I want to show you the scene now outside court. Neely's family, some supporters in tears. At points, you saw fights happening. And look at the protests after the verdict over a case that was at the intersection of a lot of issues on race, crime, homelessness, mental health. Witnesses say Neely went into a subway car in May 2023 and began acting bizarrely. That's when Penny stepped in. We're going to show you that moment captured on camera, but we want to warn you, it is hard to watch. You see Penny with his arms wrapped around Neely's neck. Two other men are also trying to hold Neely down as he struggles on the ground. Rahema Ellis has been following this. She is in New York City for us tonight. Rahema, the jury didn't deliberate on this criminally negligent homicide charge for very long. They were deadlocked on the manslaughter charge that got dismissed. So talk through what seemed to be the key for jurors to acquit Daniel Penny.
They just felt, apparently, that the prosecution didn't prove its case in terms of criminally negligent homicide. It took this juror less than an hour this morning to reach that decision on this case against Daniel Penny, because the definition of criminal negligence is when someone causes death and it's more than just ordinary carelessness. Daniel Penny had said to the police the day that this happened that he did not intend to cause the death of Jordan Neely. He was just trying to, his words, put him down so he would not be a threat to any passengers on the train. As you point out, some people thought that he was a hero. Other people were saying that he was a vigilante and that something really needed to be done in terms of holding him responsible. There were these charges, as you point out, second-degree manslaughter, dismissed, criminally negligent homicide. He was found not guilty of that. Hallie?
That split screen that you talk about, Rahema, has divided people not just in New York, but all across the country. There has been a ripple effect from this case. There has been some, capital D discourse that had this happened, let's say 3-4 years ago, perhaps this verdict may have been different, given that the country felt like it was in a different moment. Can you talk about the broader reaction here? What comes next here?
Well, let me answer the last question first. And what comes next is that will be a civil wrongful death suit filed against Daniel Penny. And people are continuing. You can hear just right next to me.
I was going to say, obviously,
someone who
Rahema,
is concerned about the verdict. Yeah, it's still a case. It's still very fresh on the minds of people here, and they are voicing their objection to the way this went down. As I point out, even across the country, as you say, people are reacting to this. The Vice President-elect, J.D. Vance, he put out a statement today saying this case never should have been prosecuted in the first place, and he's very glad that the verdict came down that he did. Also, a note from the Coalition for Homeless People talking about that Jordan Neely wasn't the only victim, but the victims in this are all of those people who are homeless and who might also be struggling from mental illness and struggling to survive on the street. So again, as I say, some people looked at this as Daniel Penny, the hero, but others saw him as a vigilante, and that race played a big part in what he did. But tonight, no criminal charges against him anymore, but he is facing a civil case against him. Hallie?
Rahema Ellis, thank you very much. Appreciate that. A stunning new era unfolding in the Middle East tonight as Syrian rebels try and show they are the ones in control in the country. And fighters say a new government is already getting to work. A key rebel leader meeting with the Syrian prime minister as parliament pledges to back a new administration. It is a moment in history that will reshape the region, the superpowers that run it, and quite literally the map of the Middle East. Let's bring in Matt Bradley in Lebanon for us tonight. Okay, so the fall of the Assad regime, this moment that stunned people over the course of the last 72 hours and really over the course of the last several weeks, as you saw that very quick offensive by these Syrian rebel fighters moving in, capturing Damascus here. Now what? Because that's what this all comes down to.
Yeah, well, you were talking about the stunning scenes we've been seeing from Syria, the celebrations in Damascus, a lot of this, just people going ecstatic. It's all, of course, tempered by a little bit of anxiety about what all of this is going to mean and what it's going to bring for Syria and really the rest of the region. But we should note that there has been, as you were talking about, something like a peaceful transition of power, something like what looks like liberalism, possibly on the march in Syria. That would be a shocking development. But given the shocking development developments that you mentioned that we've seen over the past couple of weeks, maybe it's not such a surprise. We've already been seeing conciliatory statements, and I'll quote these first from Syria's parliament, which is essentially now, it was loyal to Bashar al-Assad, who is now getting in Moscow with his family. They released a statement saying that they expressed their will. The fall of Assad, the Syrian People's Council support the desire to build a new Syria with a bright future. Then the elders from the town of Qardaha, this is the area where Bashar al-Assad, or his father, Hafiz al-Assad, who was also known notoriously as a dictator, he hails from this area. And this area, of course, as we've been seeing from a lot of Middle Eastern dictators, they will tend to pile money into their hometowns. This Council of Elders released a statement saying that they want to remove all statues and images from public squares and places. This is, of course, referring to statues of Bashar and Hafiz al-Assad and the rest of their family members, celebrating the cult of personality. This just goes to show this entire country, which has been locked in a war for 13 years, is now strikingly falling in line behind this new leader, a man who only about 10 years ago had known ties to al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, which he has since disavowed. But you'd be forgiven if you're in the international community for not necessarily believing him. But today, Hallie, we got some fresh news that it looks as though this man, this leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, has appointed a new prime minister, a man who was the prime minister of his regional government that the rebels controlled for the past couple of years in northwest Syria out of the town of Idlib. Now, so far, we've been seeing him meeting with the outgoing prime minister, who was appointed by Bashar al-Assad, and meeting with al-Jolani. There was this picture earlier today of all of them meeting together. This looks like something that we really see quite rarely in this part of the world. And we don't always see in America either, a peaceful transition of power.
Speaking of, I guess you could say, you've got former President Trump, now President-elect Trump, who is set to take office in quite literally just over a month from now. So the timing here matters. He has indicated that he wants a hands-off approach to Syria. That is what he has said. Even in the last 48 hours, that has been part of his doctrine, right, over the course of his 4 years in office here. How does that shape or not what happens on the ground in Syria?
Look, I don't know. And I think a lot of us don't know. I'm not sure if Donald Trump even knows. His foreign policy is pretty scattered. The fact of the matter is that Donald Trump was very much against new wars back during his first term. But he was the first and only president to directly attack the Assad regime. The United States put money into fighting against Islamic State in Syria and that kind of thing, supporting with lethal and non-lethal aid some of these rebel groups that were rising up against Bashar al-Assad about 10 years ago during the height of the Arab Spring. But it was Donald Trump, when he came into power, who fired missiles at targets belonging to Bashar al-Assad and his regime. So while Donald Trump may be able to say that he doesn't want anything to do with Syria, and we can believe him, his past behavior during his first term would show that he actually opened up a new front in that war.
There's also the matter, not at all insignificant, of the American journalist who's been basically held in Syria for more than a decade now. His family is speaking with our own Lester Holt. We're just getting a look at some of that interview here. I want to share what they told Lester. They're clinging to hope that the fall of Assad means, as President Biden has suggested, that their son is still alive, that he may be able to come home. Let me play it.
Does this feel different somehow?
It does feel different.
It definitely feels different.
We had several meetings here in Washington, both the State Department and the White House, and one of the things that we kept saying and ended up being echoed by them was that, in chaos there's opportunity. This is an opportunity, and it feels stronger than any that we've seen or felt in a long time.
So where does the search for Austin Tice stand?
Yeah, well, it sounds as though the Biden administration is sending a special envoy to here in Lebanon, I guess, with the intention of going over to Syria, or at least to do negotiations here to try and finally free Austin Tice. But I got to tell you, Hallie, it just pains me to hear these parents who have been struggling with their missing son for more than the past decade. But I have to tell you, hearing them talking about their hopes and their optimism, it's hard for me to reconcile that with what we're seeing here. The fact is that no one has seen or heard from Austin Tice directly for more than 10 years. And if the Syrian government had him, Why wouldn't they say that they had him? Why wouldn't they show his face? Why wouldn't they say that he was imprisoned? Why wouldn't they put him on trial? We've seen that done with several other dissidents. He's been held as a hostage, but totally incommunicado. Now, if the Biden administration says they have information that reveals that he's still alive, or if his parents are saying that they have their own information that says that he's still alive, well, I don't have my own information, so I can't argue with that. But when you look at what you're seeing here, it does look really unlikely that Austin Tice is still with us.
Matt Bradley, thank you very much. Speaking of Syria, we're just getting in some new reaction from President-elect Trump's top intelligence pick as she's facing questions about her alleged ties to the now ousted Assad leadership. On Capitol Hill, Tulsi Gabbard, you see her there, Mr. Trump's choice for Director of National Intelligence, after one of several meetings she has planned with Republican senators. Brian Nobles is on Capitol Hill for us. Let's just preface, there's a lot going on, right? There's a lot of moving pieces. I think you see it even reflect with what we've got going on. Let's start with Gabbard and some new reporting from one of our colleagues, Dan DeLuce, showing that there are and appear to be bipartisan concerns about her time in Congress, that she might have leaked information to the Assad regime to the point that a Syrian defector's identity was hidden from her when she entered the room. Like, in other words, they were so concerned she would reveal his identity, they didn't tell her who he was fully. In the last few minutes, she says she supports President-elect Trump's stance. What else are we hearing about Tulsi Gabbard and that nexus to Syria?
Yeah, I think this is perhaps the biggest potential problem that she has when it comes to her confirmation process here by the United States Senate. It is safe to say that there are a number of senators that at least want her to explain her position as it relates to Syria and Russia. The fact that she had this secret meeting with Bashar al-Assad. What did she talk about during that meeting? What came of that meeting? And we tried to press Tulsi Gabbard on all of those points today. She did briefly speak to reporters, and I specifically pressed her on the idea that some of her fellow members of Congress have described her as a national security threat. And this is how she responded.
My own views and experiences have been shaped by my multiple deployments and seeing firsthand the cost of war and the threat of Islamist terrorism. It's one of the many reasons why I appreciate President Trump's leadership and his election.
So Gabbard has explained that trip to Syria to visit with Assad as trying to find some level of communication with the dictator in an area that was war-ravaged, looking for a peaceful exit to that problem, and also her concern about the rise of Islamic terrorists in that region. And if Assad were to be deposed, that Islamic terrorists would fill that void, which is a concern that national security experts have. But they also believe that Assad was such a brutal dictator that a change was necessary. And it's also important to point out Assad's close ties to Vladimir Putin, something that Gabbard has also not fully explained.
Ryan, as mentioned, there are a number of reporting targets that you and the team have on Capitol Hill. Can Pete Hegseth get confirmed? As you mentioned, can Tulsi Gabbard get confirmed? What happens with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. when he starts his rounds on the Hill here? And then, of course, there's Kash Patel, the man, the very controversial Trump loyalist, seen as a lightning rod picked to lead the FBI. And the reason why I bring this up is because in his conversation with Kristen, the president-elect talked about members of the January 6th committee who investigated that attack on the Capitol. Here's what he said.
For what they did, honestly, they should go to jail.
So you think Liz Cheney should go to jail?
For what they did.
Everyone on the committee, you think
I think
should
everybody,
go to jail.
Anybody that voted in favor.
Are you going to direct your FBI director and your attorney general to send them to jail?
No, not at all. I think that they'll have to look at that, but I'm going to focus on drill, baby, drill.
Okay, so this is an interesting response, Ryan, because on the one hand, he says he wants him to go to jail. He wants him behind bars. The other hand, he says, I'm not going to tell him to do it. But he is clearly making his desires known here. And Kash Patel has ears. How much has that come up, or do you anticipate it coming up on the Hill?
Well, it's definitely going to come up, Hallie, but I guess it's the form and fashion in which it comes up. And there is two ways to look at this, right? Republicans believe that Kash Patel's in a position to go and clean house at the FBI, not necessarily at doing Trump's bidding, but because they feel that the FBI and the Department of Justice have been unfair, particularly to conservatives. And as a result, they believe that Patel's the man to fix that problem. Listen to what John Cornyn, who is on the Intelligence Committee and someone who will have a big say in Patel's confirmation. Listen to what he said after that meeting.
That is one of the biggest abuses that we've seen under Biden and under Obama to some extent, is that the erosion of its apolitical function into one that then chooses sides in a political contest and then uses the power of government to go after your opponents. That's wrong. That needs to change. And that was the first thing I said to him. He said he agreed.
So you have to follow the logic here, right? There's this huge concern that Donald Trump's going to use the Department of Justice to go after his political enemies. Republicans are arguing that's what happened in the previous administration, and Donald Trump was the target, and it's going to be Kash Patel's job to restore integrity to the department. I can bet there are more than a few Democrats who look at that line of thinking with a degree of skepticism. Hallie.
Ryan Noble is live for us on the Hill tonight. Ryan, thank you very much. We want to take it back now live to Pennsylvania, where we are waiting on this news conference from local police, and we're just learning the New York Police Department officials as well. You see it on the left side of your screen. You see somebody sort of standing in front of those microphones. That is where we expect this news conference to begin. On the right side of your screen, that is this so-called strong person of interest, Luigi Mangione, as he's been identified by police. He is walking into the Blair County Courthouse for an arraignment that we believe is happening or is about to happen as we speak. We can't tell you for sure. We can't have cameras in there. We're not allowed to have any videotaping equipment. We do have a team of producers and our George Solis, who's sitting in the room, and will bring us any information as we get it. Remember, arraignments tend to be fairly quick affairs. He will presumably enter a plea on, and this is important here, on a gun charge. All of it, of course, in connection to the case that has captivated the country, the killing of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson right in the broad daylight of the morning, Midtown Manhattan, in front of a tourist hotel last week. This moment ending a nearly 6-day manhunt for the person of interest who police released photos of. I want to bring in now Gary Grumbach, who is outside the Altoona police station, Frank Figluzzi, our NBC News national security analyst, Danny Savalos, our NBC News legal analyst as well. Gary, let me start with you here on what is happening as we speak. I believe that you and your team are near the jail that Mangione was transferred from to head over to the courthouse where we're awaiting that arrangement, right?
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. He just spent several hours here in the police department behind me with investigators from the NYPD, with folks from the Altoona Police Department and the Pennsylvania State Police, and, of course, federal officials as well, being interviewed. That's what we believe was happening in this police department. He was being processed, he was being interviewed, and then just minutes ago, we saw him being moved over from the police department to the courthouse where he will face his initial appearance here. Now, it's important to note, as you mentioned, this is not an initial appearance on what happened in New York. This is on a separate gun charge that will be sort of a state issue here. That's sort of how they get him first, and then they're going to bring him to New York for further charges if he is indeed the suspect that they are looking for. But all indications are that this is the man they are looking for here. And I just want to talk through sort of what it took to get to this point. We're looking at 5, almost 6 days of investigations, thousands of hours of video that investigators have been going through, hundreds of tips that the NYPD has been receiving and the FBI has been combing through, forensic evidence, DNA fingerprints, IP addresses, and they used so many different ways to try to get to this point. Of course, we're in Altoona, Pennsylvania. We are not anywhere near New York City, but it does connect from Altoona to New York on a Greyhound bus line. Did he take that Greyhound bus line to get here? That's one of the many outstanding questions that we have. They use drones, they use helicopters, they use canines, scuba divers to try to get to the point we are right now. Hallie.
There's a lot of questions here, Gary. Frank, let me bring you on this, because even just in what Gary has described here, how did he get to the McDonald's if, in fact, he did end up taking that bus from New York? Did he get help from anybody else? Is there any other person of interest who police may be looking for in connection to what has happened here? Explain the distinction, right? Ghost gun, as police have called it, that is consistent with their words, the weapon that they believe was used in the death of Brian Thompson here. What stands out to you?
Yeah, all good questions that detectives are working on even as we speak. This is someone really who had decided not to flee entirely. Something caused him to keep the gun on him, the fake IDs, the suppressor, and an explanation, reportedly, of why he's doing this, and then stand in a McDonald's, sit down and eat so he could be identified. So there's an activism here, and his writings, I think, are going to come out. And if you look at his social media, as I have done, he's someone who really aligns himself with the Unabomber. He has read the Unabomber's manifesto as recently as this year. He wrote a review of it. He concluded that there ethically are times when it's okay to murder somebody. He rails against greed and corporate money. So that's what we're looking at here. And we still haven't found a tie directly to UnitedHealthcare and this person of interest. It may be that there isn't one.
I want to point to something that our team, according to two senior law enforcement sources, say that investigators are looking into, and that is a picture of an X-ray of a spine that was posted by Mangione to one of his social media accounts, and it's got, you see it there, screws in the back. Our team, Tom Winter, Jonathan Deans, names familiar to our viewers, report that police are trying to figure out if this could have any connection to whatever connection that Mangione has to the killing of Thompson here. Can you help us understand why that could be impactful or significant?
Yeah, indeed. One of the books that he read, in addition to the Unabomber's manifesto and book, is a book that refers to beating the system on back pain. It's a book that says, look, this is a racket. Doctors are not going to help you with your back pain. So he might have this connection. This might be what we're looking for with regard to some denial of health care. Yet this young man comes from a wealthy family. Unlikely that he's hurting for insurance, although I do note he's at an age where you do get cut off from your parents' insurance. So that might be a factor. He's 26 years old. Anything that goes toward ideology is important. Yeah.
And I also want to be clear, too, and Danny, I'll bring you into this conversation here. There is what appears to be, we don't know yet, right? This is early minutes as far as the investigation and as far as police, media, others looking into who Luigi Mangione is. There's some potentially fake and sketchy stuff that's out there. There's some, we believe, some real stuff that's out there as well. So I just want to set the table for viewers there that we are going to be super careful in what we talk about and what we show you to make sure that it is, in fact, reportable and confirmed. The thing that we are waiting on now, Danny, you see on the left side of your screen in that left box there, that is the news conference that we believe should begin really any minute. Danny, once Mangione does get arraigned, talk about that process and what typically happens after.
Yeah, preliminary arraignment is typically held before what's called a magisterial district justice. It's your very first appearance after you're arrested. Pennsylvania doesn't really indict. They go by criminal complaint. And if this was warrantless, then they'll go before the district justice, and then the district justice issues the warrant of arrest, or you may hear MDJ thrown around. These are folks, these courthouses are usually attached to the police station. You could drive right by them and not notice them. They're not part of the main court of common pleas, which is usually in the county seat. So from there, the next question is extradition. And Pennsylvania has a Uniform Extradition Act. And what happens is the governor must receive a written request from the requesting state, that's New York, and then the governor has a legal obligation to turn over the defendant to the requesting state, but there are procedural requirements, and the defendant can waive those requirements and speed everything along. This won't happen tonight. This won't happen tomorrow. In all likelihood, it may take several days, and during that time, almost certainly this defendant will be held in detention at the local jail or the prison, whatever facilities they have in Blair County where they're going to hold him.
And Danny, stand by for a second. Gary, let me go back to you, because the point that Danny, that Frank have talked about is that this individual was found, apparently, according to police, spotted by an employee at like a local McDonald's, one of a few in the town of Altoona, which is a town not huge, 122,000 people, Gary. I believe that you had a chance to go to that establishment. Did anybody talk to you? Was it like, you know, did they kind of lock it down? What's the deal?
This is the definition of see something, say something, right? An employee of the McDonald's here in Altoona saw something, they said something, and they called law enforcement. And that is how this all happened. There was a $50,000 reward. We're not sure if that employee is going to get that reward. But when I walked over there to the McDonald's and chatted with some of the folks there, the managers were all certainly keeping hush-hush. They were not interested in chatting with the media. But it was very clear that there was sort of an edge to that McDonald's. The employees were certainly on edge. They were, I think, a little bit nervous, right? There was one woman who, as I was ordering some McDonald's for myself, was speaking to her mother on the phone and who said, you know what, I'm leaving early. I got to get out of here. This is all too much. So I think it has taken a toll on this community, right? Because certainly that man did have a weapon in his backpack, right? It could have been used anywhere. And certainly that is something that I think that has employees at the McDonald's on edge, and folks around the community here as well.
Well, and Frank, worth noting, it was fast police work, apparently, by Altoona PD.
Yeah, we have to credit not only that employee who did the right thing, but the Altoona PD for taking this very seriously and then patting him down, finding the gun, finding the materials, connecting with New York. All worked well. But you know what? With all the high tech in New York City and all these surveillance that we're under, It took a civilian to do the right thing and recognize that photo.
And Danny, one of the things that police credit is the release of the photo in the first place. You had one of the detectives involved in the case describing that as the linchpin here, at least one of the linchpins, in allowing this person of interest, to be highly visible. And Danny, you know this, you couldn't go online. You couldn't turn on the TV without at some point seeing that photograph, that series of pictures of him at the hostel, for example, of him in some of these other locations, in the cab, et cetera.
Yes, I mean, if this is just an anecdotal piece of evidence, but if you were at a holiday party over this weekend we just last had, this is what people were talking about. Everyone had seen the picture. They'd compared the picture to other celebrities they thought the picture looked like. People were aware of the picture. And once it was released like that, there was little doubt in my mind that we were either going to come up with someone very quickly or, and again, like I said, over the weekend, people have lots of different theories about what happened. If this was some foreign national who disappeared into the night like a James Bond movie, then maybe we'd never find out who that face belonged to. But once the image was released, in all likelihood, somebody was going to notice him. But Frank really brings up a great point. I mean, what a story that for all of this technology and all this manpower devoted to the search, it took one person. It only takes one person to see something and say something, as the saying goes.
Frank, this person of interest, Mangione, appeared to have left a series of what you could call clues, or at least maybe breadcrumbs, for lack of a better phrase. There were those, and I want to be clear, we don't know who left what, because again, Mangione has not been charged in the death of Brian Thompson. He is simply, of course, being held on this separate gun charge. So I'll phrase it like this. There were a series of clues that police discovered. There were those shell casings found on the scene. There was Monopoly money found in a recovered backpack. There was a 3-page manifesto. That is how police have described it here. A 3-page document, I should say, that was found on Mangione's person when he was taken into custody.
Yeah, he's leaking to us, right? He's saying, I've got this grievance or this belief or this ideology, and here I am. And this is why I believe he's probably talking to detectives. You know, we've heard he's been in the police department for hours. That's indicative of someone who likely may not have lawyered up yet, probably has something to say about this. The interesting thing also is, with all of these clues, including the video surveillance that he allowed himself to really be photographed on, we've got this McDonald's employee who spotted him, but not his family, friends, colleagues, or did they talk to the police? We don't know that yet. That's a big question for me. We've all seen the photo. His family and friends must have seen the photo. What's going on there?
Frank, I want to pause you here because we are now just getting some of those court documents here. Forgive me, it literally uploaded upside down into the upload file here. So I've flipped our computer here now. But I want to just go through it. We are seeing this kind of as you are seeing this here. And in it, we see, obviously, the charge on the gun that was discussed by Tom Winter, by you previously. And there is a short series of paragraphs. They say that officers were able to locate this male, matching the description here. He was sitting in the back of the building, they say, at a table. Now, interestingly, they say he was wearing a blue medical mask when he was seen at the McDonald's. So he had a mask on, according to police. And according to these court documents, he was looking at a laptop. He also had a backpack on the floor where near the table that he was sitting at. Apparently, police obviously made contact. They asked him to pull down his mask. He did. They provided him that New Jersey driver's license, which police have said is a fake license. And I want to read this to you, that one of the officers who responded asked this person if he had been to New York recently, and the male became quiet and started to shake, according to police in these court documents that we are just getting. They go on to say that they realized, of course, that it was a fake ID. They asked this person why he lied about his name. Mangione responded, "I clearly should not have." And he was then instructed to place the defendant into custody. They obviously then searched the backpack, found those items that we showed. Frank, Danny, Gary, obviously this is all interesting insight into how this capture of this quote-unquote strong person of interest happened in the first place. And Danny, I'll go to you first on that.
Yes, I mean, this sounds like a standard police interview that quickly escalates to probable cause for an arrest. And once they pat him down, they're going to do a security or a safety pat down. And then it probably it happened very quickly that they discovered the firearm. Then you've got your PC, your probable cause, to make the arrest. And that's the key. That gives them the time, because now they can hold him on this gun charge. It'll be under, I haven't seen the actual section. I expect it's one of the, without a serial number or person not authorized to have a firearm under Pennsylvania's, it's called a VUFA, Violation of Uniform Firearms Act. That'll be enough to hold him for the magisterial district justice. The next business day, a common pleas judge, the upper court, may review that decision, but in all likelihood, that police work will lead to his detention, and he will be extradited sooner rather than later. But yeah, I mean, this sounds like, at least according to reports, it followed the perfect script for police-citizen encounters, which then matriculated to probable cause, then to a warrantless arrest, and now to the magisterial district justice.
We're working to show you some of these court documents here on screen, and as we do, we've got them here. I want to bring in Tom Winter, bring back Tom Winter, who's been pouring through these. And Tom, there are several charges here that he faces, including, it looks like, at least one related to that fake ID.
That's right, Hallie. So you can't have a fake ID. If an officer stops you and you present them with a fake ID, charge number one. And then from there, we will go on to charges involving the gun. I thought the detail here about when the officer asked this individual... the individual about it, and he started shaking, to be interesting. There's a lot of information. It's great that in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania State, that we have the opportunity to get these narratives. They always do tend to do that, and they're written from the police perspective, Hallie. So just to jump inside the reporter's notebook for a second, this is not the same in all states. We will not get this in New York if this individual is brought to New York and charged here. We will be very thin on details. But in Pennsylvania, the officer actually makes the initial criminal complaint. So that's the reason why you're seeing actually detailed narrative from the first couple of officers that showed up there. And so I think that's something that can be helpful in these particular cases as far as getting information. I need to go through some of the finer points, the devil's in the boxes in Pennsylvania. So there's all sorts of little boxes. You're looking at the top of your court documents there. Let me go do that, and I'll jump back on as soon as we see something.
I know you will, Tom. Go do that. I want to bring back in Frank Figliuzzi here. And let me just explain to people what you're seeing on the left side of your screen. This is in news jargon called a white balance. They are making sure the cameras are set. We heard a mic check earlier. This is just like the logistical process of getting live television back to you. And you will see this news conference live right here on NBC News Now. Frank, let me go to you here, because Tom picked up on this sentence here from these charging documents that police say that they asked this person if he had been to New York recently, and the male, I'm quoting here, the male became quiet and started to shake. I think naturally that leads to the question, and we don't know the answer to this so far as I know, is he speaking at all to law enforcement? Is he talking to police about where he has been and what has happened? I presume that is the first question that law enforcement investigators would be asking.
Yeah, of course, we're into speculation, so we've got to proceed carefully. But in my 25 years of law enforcement experience, this scenario that's been described here by the officer is indicative of someone who's not a hardened criminal. They're not going to start shaking. And this comment, I shouldn't have, with regard to using a fake ID, possessing a fake ID. This is not someone who's done something like this before. I've heard reports that he has no criminal record, but it also helps the officers with any PC that they needed. You know, all of this helps the mindset of the officer. I'm going to conduct a Terry search, a Terry stop. I'm going to frisk him for my safety. I've got probable cause and I've got reasonable suspicion that when he took that mask down, he looked just like the guy that's wanted in New York. All of that is interesting, as is, by the way, the fact that the laptop was open. What was it open to? They likely preserved that. He probably wasn't looking at the Sunday Night Football game results. He probably was monitoring the publicity on his own fugitive status.
And Frank, let me go to Gary Grumbuck on that, who was live outside that Altoona jail. And Gary, these details were not previously revealed to a degree by police.
Yeah, they were not. We have the details, and we also have the actual charges themselves. So I just want to go through real quick for you. The things that he'll be charged with here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, completely separate from what's happening in New York State, or what will happen in New York State, with them possessing instruments of a crime, false identification to law enforcement authorities, forgery, acts of firearms not to be carried without a license. That's carrying a firearm without a license. That's the ghost gun that he still had in his backpack. And then tampering with records or identification. That's the false fake ID that he mentioned. But you're talking about these details, too. The employee of the McDonald's saw this man, the suspect, in the back of the McDonald's eating something from McDonald's, and that is when they called police. He was wearing a mask, and that is when police showed up and had the conversation with him that you're talking about. Now, this is a guy who went to Penn. He's highly educated. He went to a $40,000 a year all-boys private school in Baltimore. His parents, from our understanding, from our investigating this afternoon, seem to have well-paying jobs as well. This is not your typical identification for a criminal. And that is something that I think will be interesting in this, too, especially with what is reported to have been found on the gun related to the healthcare industry, the words related to on the bullets related to the healthcare industry. And I think that it speaks to perhaps the motive here, as well as what his mindset was at the time as well. Hallie.
And Gary, thank you very much. Frank, let me go back to you here for a second, because also in these official documents, or these court documents, police say that they do confirm that they believe this was a 3D printed pistol, as Gary said, and a black silencer that was also 3D printed. That matters here. That's significant.
Well, it's also, by the way, not just a Pennsylvania charge, but it could be a federal charge if the federal government wishes to do that. And I'm glad you've raised this, because ghost guns are becoming increasingly common at crime scenes right now. They're illegal for a reason. They can't be traced. You can go and rent a 3D printer and access it for, however many hours you want. Some libraries allow you to sign up for access to a 3D printer. You can make these at home or at some other facility. It's easy. Instructions are online. And that's why agencies like the ATF and the FBI and all of us should be concerned.
Frank, thank you. I want to just let folks know what's happening right now as we speak. On the left side of your screen, you are seeing what we expect to be a news conference at the Blair County Courthouse. This is in basically western Pennsylvania, in the town of Hollidaysburg, not too far from Altoona, where this person of interest was found at the McDonald's. We thought it was going to start maybe 20 minutes ago. That has not happened yet. That could potentially be because we are waiting for information on the arraignment, which is set to happen upstairs from where that news conference is. We have a team inside the room. No details yet on that arraignment, on any plea that may have been entered here by Luigi Mangione. But the second that we get any information, we will bring it to you here live. Danny Savalos is still with us. Gary Grumbach is still with us. Our George Solis is inside the courthouse. Stephanie Gosk is out in Pennsylvania as well. And Danny, let me go to you. Actually, Gary, let me go to you, because I'm being told that I guess the arraignment is happening now. We know?
Yeah, the arraignment is underway, and he's being charged with 2 felonies and 3 misdemeanors, as we had just laid out. Forgery in the 2nd degree, firearms count is carrying without a license in the 3rd degree, and the misdemeanors are tampering and then possession of an instrument of a weapon, and then the fake ID. So that's all happening now. Again, as you mentioned earlier, these arraignments don't last very long. I think 15, 20 minutes maximum, right? So certainly they don't want to have a press conference before this is finished, before this all wraps up, and then we'll see officials from statewide offices and local law enforcement officials speak to the reporters as well.
And to be clear, the information there, the charges, that is revealed, of course, in these documents that we are getting now just into us here. On the top of your screen, if you look at the top right, that is the first glimpse. Police walking Luigi Mangione from jail in that motorcade. He's walking into the Blair County Courthouse. You see it there. His picture, of course, was practically unmissable over the course of the last maybe 5-6 days. Danny Savalos is joining us now. Danny, there is, I wonder if you can speak to any jurisdictional issue here, because we know that our team on the ground has seen an NYPD motorcade in Altoona, Pennsylvania. The Altoona PD are the ones who stopped this individual who responded to that initial tip earlier this morning here. We know, and we heard it from the New York Police Commissioner. She talked about the deep and important partnership between local, federal, and state law enforcement at a moment like this.
Yes, the Pennsylvania law requires that the governor eventually turn over this defendant to New York, but that doesn't stop the governor or local law enforcement from cooperating with law enforcement from other states who are searching for a fugitive. And ultimately, interestingly enough, the governor actually has a real part, a statutory legal part in this extradition process beyond just giving a press conference, whereas the governor is not really involved in a lot of criminal cases firsthand. But in this case, he might be if he issues that warrant with his seal to return this defendant back to New York to face justice. But now he has actual charges here in Pennsylvania as well. Interestingly enough, the firearm charge is not the lead charge here. It's the F2, felony 2 in Pennsylvania, forgery. And that's because forgery can be graded a couple different ways, but it's when you forge a government document, presumably a license, that'll get you into F2 land, statutory maximum 10 years. This is going to be more than enough to hold him. Even though the magistrate has to address bail at this preliminary arraignment, then after that, he will likely be held long enough for New York to get all their ducks in a row and get him extradited. And again, he might even agree to extradition, but if he doesn't, the F2 forgery and the F3 firearm charge under Pennsylvania's Uniform Firearms Act, that's going to be enough to at least charge him here, hold him, and then give them enough time to get him back to New York.
And let's talk about that fake ID, because according to these documents here, he was asked for an ID. He gave that New Jersey license, the one that was, the name Mark Rosario that we have showed you here. That turned out to, of course, be fake. And police discovered that when they ran the information through dispatch. They took the license, ran it, and that is when they asked this individual, Mangione, if he had been to New York recently. And that moment happened where he became quiet, and police say he began to shake, Danny. That is obviously central to at least the charges he faces in Pennsylvania, although it is not outside the realm of possibility that he could face charges, maybe, we don't know, but potentially in New York, given the presence of New York PD and given what police have said already about this case.
Yeah, and what's really interesting, I don't know what the policy is of this particular police department, but depending on whether it's troopers, they may have actual body cam video of this moment that may eventually emerge, and we may all be able to see it because of the advent of body-worn cameras, dash cams. I mean, they're virtually everywhere now. And really, this case is about cameras. It's about cameras being virtually everywhere, for better or worse. Sometimes it's for worse, but when it comes to tracking down a criminal across state lines or a suspected criminal, it can be very, very effective. And we may actually see that moment recreated on body cam video someday, depending on what the arresting officers were wearing.
Let me go to Tom Winter now, because, Tom, we are getting, as we speak, new information from our team inside the courtroom, right? Walk us through it.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. So basically, as you can imagine, they're going to hold him pending the outcome of what the NYPD may or may not do in this particular case. So he's been denied bail. There's a preliminary hearing set for December 23rd at that courthouse. Now, in Pennsylvania, and I'm going to do Danny Savalos proud here, preliminary hearings almost never happen, because what you're asking prosecutors to do is put on all the evidence you might put out there if, in fact, you were to bring this to trial. So who wants that before a trial, to basically have a mini trial where you don't get a chance to respond ahead of time? But in reality, Hallie, likely he'll be extradited to New York if, in fact, he is charged to face what would be much more serious charges. He gave a last address echoing what the NYPD said earlier today of Honolulu, Hawaii. And he said he moved around a lot, apparently, in discussing with the judge. So we're continuing to get these updates in as they're in court, and as we continue to get more information from our colleague George Solis, who's inside of there. So that's what this is all about. You're looking there at NYPD detectives who are at this press conference. They sent down one of their highest-ranking executives, Deputy Commissioner for Operation Kaz Daughtry. He runs the drone program. But the people you're looking at there are part of the detective squads, they're called, and some of the specialized detective units who would make this case and would also review the evidence. And so that's some of the people that you're looking at right there.
Is an indication, obviously, Tom, that this news conference is set to begin likely any second here, given that those folks are in the room. Talk more about the investigative process that has led up to this moment, Tom, and whether we know anything about whether Mangione may be talking police. Are you hearing anything from your sources on that we can report, or not yet?
Yeah, Hallie, you and I were talking about this on Nightly News last night. So there's finding the guy, priority number one, and then arresting the person, priority number two. Well, that was done at the behest of some two eagle-eyed individuals at the McDonald's. So check that box. Next box is you've got to tie this person back to the evidence in New York before you can file charges against him, not only to satisfy the Pennsylvania judge, but if he's charged, to ultimately satisfy a judge and a jury potentially here in New York City. So that's the type of work that needs to be going on now. They've got to say, okay, does the gun match? Can we get that gun back to New York City? Can we get the markings on it? Excuse me, the markings that are on the gun. That's when they fire it into like a big water tank and they hold up the bullet and they see whether or not the bullet that was used in this particular shooting, if it matches a type of bullet that would be fired out of that gun that you're looking at there on screen, just to give you a sense of how this gets all put together. So they're going to, in very layman's terms, I might add. So they're going to do all of that type of work. That is critical work. That takes a little bit of time, but they don't need to do all of it. You don't need to have a perfect case here. You just need to be able to say, look, for certain reasonable reasons. And I mean, I think that New Jersey identification is probably so helpful to them. For based on just a handful of items of evidence, they'll probably be able to get to a point where they can charge him in New York, and then we'll have him come here. So that December, late December preliminary hearing that we've been talking about here, I would be stunned if that hearing ever happened. He'll likely be back in New York, but just based on what they've been saying here today.
Okay, we are seeing this news conference just seconds away from beginning, and before and we're watching the folks here walk in, including, of course, the Pennsylvania governor, Josh Shapiro. He is set to speak at the microphones here. We don't know how long this is going to go. We don't know how many people are set to speak, but we will take you here now. Let's listen in.
My name is Deputy Chief Derek Swope of the Altoona Police Department. Today we're going to go through an incident that occurred in the city of Altoona. This morning at approximately 9:14 a.m., Altoona police officers received a call of a suspicious male at a local restaurant. It was reported that the male matched the description of the UnitedHealthcare murder in New York City. When officers arrived, they made contact with the male who had a face mask on. That male was asked to remove his face mask, and officers immediately recognized him as a suspect in the New York City shooting in recent days. That male was asked for a form of identification. He then provided a fake identification card out of New Jersey. After a brief investigation, it was determined that the ID provided was in fact a fake ID, and he was subsequently arrested for a forgery charge. Once he was taken into custody for that forgery charge, he was transported to the Altoona Police Department. Once at the Altoona Police Department, that male was searched instant to arrest. It was discovered that he had a United States passport that identified him as, Luigi Mangione. From there, continued search of his property. A firearm was located, and a suppressor was also located. There were also other items of evidentiary value that were located that would assist in this investigation. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Governor Shapiro for some words.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Swope. And let me acknowledge and thank the law enforcement who I'm joined with today, beginning with Lieutenant Colonel Bivens of the Pennsylvania State Police. I want to thank Senior Special Supervisory Agent Szabo from the FBI, and acknowledge NYPD Commissioner Daughtry and the women and men of the NYPD who join us here today, District Attorney Weeks, who you will hear from shortly. And I just concluded a briefing with Mayor Adams and Commissioner Tisch from New York. I want to begin by thanking our fellow Pennsylvania resident who acted as a hero today. Pennsylvania resident saw something early this morning at McDonald's and said something to our local police. And our local police here in Altoona acted swiftly. I want to say a special thanks to Officer Tyler Fry of the Altoona Police Department. Officer Fry is about 6 months into his time serving his fellow people here in Pennsylvania, and he acted swiftly, he acted with smarts, and he acted with calm. You know, safety often turns on the strength of the relationship between the community and law enforcement. We have that strong relationship here in Altoona, and it was proven here today. I want to ask all of our fellow Pennsylvanians to demonstrate the same type of thoughtfulness and courage and smarts as the individual at McDonald's did this morning, and help law enforcement here in Pennsylvania as we continue with our investigation. You'll see photos of the suspect who is here, and you should know that this suspect traveled between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, making stops in between, obviously here in Altoona. I want to ask all of our fellow Pennsylvanians to help us with any tips that they might have by contacting us at 800-4PA-TIPS. Again, that number is 800-4PA-TIPS. The suspect was just arraigned here in the courthouse, and presumably New York will file charges very, very soon. That process will continue to play out, and justice will be delivered in this case. This case is hinged on attention. In fact, the attention in this case and the killing of Brian Thompson was helpful, no doubt, in allowing us to capture this killer, in alerting that individual at McDonald's this morning, and then having that individual contact police. But some attention in this case, especially online, has been deeply disturbing, as some have looked to celebrate instead of condemning this killer. Brian Thompson was a father to two. He was a husband, and he was a friend to many. And yes, he was the CEO of a health insurance company. In America, we do not kill people in cold blood to resolve policy differences or express a viewpoint. I understand people have real frustration with our healthcare system, and I have worked to address that throughout my career. But I have no tolerance, nor should anyone, for one man using an illegal ghost gun to murder someone because he thinks his opinion matters most. In a civil society, we are all less safe when ideologues engage in vigilante justice. In some dark corners, this killer is being hailed as a hero. Hear me on this. He is no hero. The real hero in this story is the person who called 911 at McDonald's this morning. The real heroes every day in our society are the women and men who put on uniforms like these and go out in our communities to keep us safe. This killer was not a hero. He should not be hailed. Mr. Thompson, I understand, was laid to rest earlier today in Minnesota in a private setting. As the conversation continues about this case, let's be mindful not to dehumanize him and make him just an avatar of a system that is disliked by many. He was a father, he was a husband, and he did not deserve to die like this on a sidewalk in New York City. I again want to thank all law enforcement who's present here this evening. Law enforcement works best when it works together. In this case, you have the New York Police Department working together with the Altoona Police Department, working together with our Pennsylvania State Police and our partners at the federal level as well. Everyone came together to solve this case and keep the public safe. I again want to ask my fellow Pennsylvanians, if you have any information regarding this suspect or his travels throughout Pennsylvania, please share those tips with us immediately. And with that, I want to thank District Attorney Weeks for his important work today and invite him to the microphone to say a few words.
Thank you, Governor Shapiro. Good evening, everyone. I would echo the governor's sentiments. Law enforcement does work at its best when they work together. I'd also like to thank District Attorney Seidel. He and his staff came down from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office today in record time to assist us at the Altoona Police Department. And as the governor stated, the state police, the Altoona Police Department, the FBI, the New York City Police Department, Logan Township Police Department, the Blair County Sheriff's Department, and other agencies all worked together today to do what needed to be done to seek justice. I often brag about how the community in Blair County isn't afraid to say something, to report a crime, to contact local law enforcement. And I've often touted how they've made their community, whether it be Altoona or somewhere else, a safer place to live. And today I submit that a resident from Altoona and the Altoona Police Department helped make New York City a safer place to live and helped to kickstart the process to seek justice for a senseless killing. So again, I'd like to thank everybody, and it's my honor to introduce Deputy Commissioner Daugherty at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DA. On behalf of the New York City Mayor Eric Adams, my boss, Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch, wants to extend once again their appreciation to the Altoona Police Department, to your leadership team, the federals, state, local authorities, and especially to the customer at the McDonald's that seen something, says something, to the McDonald's employee that called 911 and reported this individual inside of their restaurant. The men and women behind me, the detectives, some of these detectives I've stated behind me haven't been home since Tuesday when this incident happened. They've been working this case tirelessly around the clock. And when they got that phone call, immediately they jumped in their car, the police car, and raced down here to go see if this was the individual that we were looking for. That's dedication. Their commitment to bringing this individual to justice is just standing behind me. And on behalf of the mayor and the police commissioner, they extend their thanks and appreciation to you as well. Here's a message to the criminal element that think that they want to commit a crime in New York City and cross state lines, county lines. The message is very clear. Police Commissioner Tisch's police department will find you and bring you to justice. Just look behind me. Thank you. Anybody else?
I think with that, we'll be happy to try and take a few questions.
Governor, question, I guess maybe for the local law enforcement about the arrest specifically today. I don't know who that would be.
Defer to Altoona, please.
I guess I'm curious if we could hear a little bit more about the dynamics, if you could step to the podium, sir. If we could hear a little bit more about the dynamics inside that McDonald's. I know there was some detail in the affidavit about what happened when the individual was asked if he'd been to New York. Could you speak a little bit to his demeanor and how that played out?
Sure. So it was a peaceful arrest, first and foremost. The officer quickly recognized the male as the suspect from the shooting. And within several seconds of the first contact, he had asked the suspect if he had been in New York City recently. And that really invoked a physical reaction from the suspect. He became visibly nervous, kind of shaking at that question. And he didn't really answer it directly. So that statement alone really said a lot. And the suspect didn't have to say a lot after that question to show that, he was very nervous at that point.
Would that the officer that the governor mentioned who's new on the job, who was involved in that?
Yes, so Officer Fry's here to my left. Officer Fry, can you step this way a little bit? And then his partner that he was with, Officer Joe Detweiler.
Officer, could you maybe identify yourself and maybe describe the whole interaction and what played out? Spell your name.
Yeah, Patrolman Fry, Tylerfrye. So whenever we got on scene there, we were able to pretty much find where he was at in the restaurant. And as soon as he was wearing a blue medical mask. As soon as we pulled that down, or we asked him to pull it down, me and my partner and I recognized him immediately, just from what we saw in the media with photos, videos. We just didn't even think twice about it. We knew that was our guy, but he was very cooperative with us. Didn't really give us too many issues. Once we found out his identity, we took it from there.
How does it feel after 6 months on the job as a law enforcement officer to be part of his arrest?
I can't say I was expecting it by any means, but it feels good to get a guy like that off the street, especially starting my career this way. It feels great.
So upon his arrest, has he made any statements since his arrest? Has he asked for a lawyer yet?
To my knowledge, he hasn't made any statements.
How long was he staying in Altoona, and where was he staying? And then was the gun on himself, or was it in like a car somewhere?
We are still investigating how long he's been in Altoona. There's still a lot of follow-up to do in this case. Again, the men and women behind me are assisting with that. So we're still looking into it.
I'm going to ask Lieutenant Colonel Bivens of the Pennsylvania State Police to address the question you just raised. Thank you.
So there are a lot of things that need to be followed up yet in this investigation. Certainly, there were a number of items that were found on his person, in his backpack, that have been inventoried, and we've begun to do an analysis of some of those. There were written documents. There are electronic devices that are in the process of being downloaded. Search warrants are obtained. And so over the next hours and days, those efforts will continue. And we're going to take a closer look at all of the information that we can glean from that regarding his activities up until and during the time of the homicide, his flight from New York. And we know that he has been in Pennsylvania, excuse me, for several days. And so part of that investigation will also focus on trying to retrace his steps. We've already identified businesses, for example, that he frequented in this area and activities that he engaged in. That led us to more evidence. And so all of that is becoming kind of a mountain of evidence that has to be analyzed and looked at. I'm confident we'll have a much better idea of his activities over the past number of days in New York and in Pennsylvania. Additionally, we're also trying to determine that we don't have another actor or an accomplice out there. And so this information will all be used to help us prove or disprove whether that exists and whether there were any other intended targets. So a lot of questions that are out there that are unanswered yet, but we have a lot of information that we can examine that hopefully will give us some of those pieces of data that we need. You asked, or someone asked about the interview. He was initially cooperative. He is not now. And so he has been arraigned and transported and will be securely housed pending the filing of additional charges in New York.
Governor Shapiro, you mentioned that he was in Pittsburgh at some point. Is that correct? What
Yes.
do you know about that time in Pittsburgh?
We're not going to get into any more details at this time. We would like to hear from any Pennsylvanian or any Pittsburgher who had any sightings or any dealings with the individual. That's why I specifically asked for anyone with tips to share that with us.
Can you talk about the extradition to New York? How does that process work? I know that you have your piece here, but what happens with the New York part of it?
And how long does it take?
Thank you.
So that answer depends. Once the charging documents are filed in the state of New York, we will file a fugitive justice complaint against the defendant. He'll be brought before a common pleas judge shortly thereafter, and the defendant will be presented with the option to waive his extradition or to contest his extradition. If he waives his extradition, we, of course, will make him available to the NYPD and the Manhattan District Attorney's Office as soon as we're able to arrange his transportation there. If he contests it, that process typically takes between 30 and 45 days to do the requisite paperwork, but we do that all the time in our office, and that's kind of a normal procedure.
On the matter of the backpack itself right now, the backpack itself, you had the one that was in New York. Do we know if that's the same one that he had the time of the shooting there, or is this backpack that he had here one that he may have acquired? And the findings inside, the gun, the silencer, and cash, some foreign currency as well. Is that correct?
I'll defer to someone else. I'm not going to speculate on any of the interpretation of the evidence. I'm going to rely on the officers doing the investigation to complete that and reach their conclusions.
Can we say that at this point he is a suspect in the hit on the United CEO? Can we call him a suspect at this point? Obviously, he was arrested on other.
Yes, as we confirmed at his preliminary arraignment, with the permission of District Attorney Seidel, we expect charges to be filed forthwith. And obviously, that I'm not going to speculate on that timing, but tonight or tomorrow or sometime in the very near future for homicide.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.